The pulsing lights of club resonance cut through the darkness like electric heartbeats, painting the faces of the crowd in fleeting strokes of neon blue and crimson. It was just past midnight, and the dance floor had reached that perfect density, packed enough to feel alive with collective energy, but not so crowded that movement became impossible. Standing above it all, perched in his booth like some modern-day Olympian, was Marcus Elliott, known to most simply as the Straight DJ. The title had started as a whispered joke among the regulars at this predominantly LGBTQ+ venue, but Marcus had embraced it, even as it sometimes made him feel like an outsider in a space where he'd found his calling. The air was thick with expectation as Marcus transitioned between tracks, his fingers dancing across the equipment with practiced precision. There was an art to controlling a crowd, to understanding the invisible threads of energy that connected everyone on the dance floor. And Marcus had spent years perfecting this craft. Tonight was important. The club owner had mentioned that some industry people would be stopping by, scouts looking for fresh talent to headline their summer festival circuit. This could be his breakthrough moment, the culmination of countless late nights and rejected demos. Let me explain why music and nightlife isn't just entertainment. It's the lifeblood of these spaces. In clubs like Resonance, music transcends mere sound. It becomes a language, a form of communication that bypasses words entirely. The DJ isn't just playing tracks. They're conducting an emotional journey, creating safe spaces through sound where people can express themselves without judgment. Marcus understood this responsibility, even if he sometimes questioned whether he truly belonged behind these particular decks. The relationship between a DJ and their crowd is intimate, almost sacred. When it works, there's a feedback loop of energy that creates something greater than the sum of its parts. Tonight, that connection was electric. You could feel it in the way bodies moved in synchronized abandon, in the spontaneous cheers when a particularly effective drop hit. Marcus watched as two strangers found each other in the music, their movements syncing as they shared a moment of pure connection. This was why he did this, why he endured the late nights and the constant hustle, for these fleeting moments of creating something beautiful. Marcus hadn't planned on becoming a DJ. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, his exposure to electronic music had been limited to whatever filtered through the algorithm of his streaming services. His parents had pushed him toward practical pursuits, business administration, accounting, paths with clear trajectories and stable futures. But during his sophomore year of college, his roommate had dragged him to an underground warehouse party, and something had awakened in him as he watched the DJ transform a cavernous, empty space into something alive and breathing through nothing but sound. He'd started small, bedroom mixing, SoundCloud uploads, opening sets at dive bars for crowds of disinterested drinkers. Each step had been a lesson in humility, but also in perseverance. Marcus had an ear for transitions that felt like revelations, for building narratives through sound that kept people engaged. What he lacked in technical training, he made up for in intuition and genuine love for the craft. Slowly, his reputation grew beyond his circle of friends. Local promoters began to take notice, and eventually, so did Vera, the owner of Club Resonance. "Your style is interesting," she told him after watching him play a set at a competitor's venue. "You don't play what's expected." "I like that." Coming from Vera, this was high praise. She was something of a legend in the city's nightlife scene, a club owner who had created one of the most inclusive and respected spaces in the region. When she offered him a monthly residency, it had felt like winning the lottery. Not everyone had been thrilled with Vera's decision. Some of the regular DJs questioned whether Marcus could properly serve Resonance's core audience. It's not about his sexuality. One had argued during a staff meeting that Marcus wasn't supposed to overhear. It's about lived experience. Can he really understand what this music means to our community? The question had haunted Marcus, making him second-guess every track selection, every transition. Was he an interloper? A tourist in a space that wasn't meant for him? Yet over the months, he'd proven himself through consistency and respect. He studied the history of house and techno, learning about their roots in Black and queer communities. He listened more than he spoke, absorbed the stories of the club's regulars, and translated what he learned into his sets. Gradually, the skepticism faded, replaced by a cautious acceptance. Some nights, when the floor was packed and moving as one entity to his music, He could almost forget the lingering sense that he was walking a tightrope of belonging. Tonight, 6 months into his residency, Marcus was playing his best set yet. He'd spent weeks preparing, digging through crates of vinyl at specialty shops, connecting with producers for exclusive tracks, crafting transitions that would feel like revelations. The first 2 hours had been a masterclass in building energy, starting with deeper, more hypnotic tracks that allowed early arrivals to settle into the space, gradually increasing the tempo and intensity as the club filled. By 1 a.m., the dance floor was a sea of movement, bodies glistening under the lights, faces transformed by the particular joy that comes from surrendering completely to music. Marcus caught Vera's eye from across the room. She raised her glass in silent approval, and he felt a surge of pride. This was what validation felt like, not just acceptance, but appreciation for what he brought to this space. The crowd was with him, trusting him to guide their night. He could feel it in the way they responded to each new direction he took them, the collective release when he finally dropped the track he'd been teasing for 20 minutes. The club's atmosphere had reached that magical tipping point where individual identities begin to dissolve into collective experience. Friends and strangers alike shared smiles, water bottles, moments of connection. Marcus watched as a group formed an impromptu circle, taking turns showcasing dance moves while others cheered them on. This was club culture at its best, a temporary autonomous zone where the hierarchies and divisions of the outside world could be momentarily forgotten. As 2 a.m. approached, Marcus felt a shift in his own energy. The adrenaline that had carried him through the first half of his set was beginning to wane, replaced by a subtle anxiety. The industry scouts Vera had mentioned were now at the bar, occasionally glancing his way while they spoke to each other. Were they impressed? Bored? It was impossible to tell from this distance. Marcus felt the weight of opportunity pressing down on him, and with it came doubt. Was he playing it too safe? Should he take more risks to stand out? The track currently playing was reaching its natural conclusion, and Marcus had to make a quick decision about where to take the energy next. His original plan had been to maintain the current vibe, uplifting, melodic house that kept the floor moving without becoming overwhelming. But something inside him was pushing for a change, a demonstration of his range and versatility. Before he could second-guess himself, he reached for a record he hadn't planned to play. Something harder, darker, with an aggressive edge that represented a significant departure from the mood he'd been cultivating. As the new track took over, its insistent, almost industrial beat slicing through the previous warmth, Marcus watched the dance floor carefully. Some people embraced the change immediately, their movements becoming more intense, more primal. Others seemed confused, their rhythm disrupted by the unexpected shift. A few people near the front exchanged glances, their expressions questioning. Marcus pushed forward, convincing himself that this was boldness, not misjudgment. He layered in samples that complicated the sound further, taking the energy in a direction that felt increasingly disconnected from what had come before. Looking back, Marcus would recognize this moment as the turning point, not just of the night, but perhaps of his career at Resonance. In trying to impress, to showcase his versatility and technical skill, he had broken the unspoken contract between DJ and dancer. He had prioritized his own agenda over the collective experience he was responsible for creating. But in the moment, caught up in his own narrative of proving himself, he couldn't see the gradual exodus beginning at the edges of the dance floor. By 2:30 a.m., the change was undeniable. What had been a packed, unified dance floor was now fragmented, with noticeable empty spaces. Some dancers remained, either too committed to their night out to be deterred or genuinely enjoying the darker direction. But the magic of earlier, that sense of collective journey, had dissipated. Marcus saw Vera in conversation with the industry scouts, her expression unreadable. When they departed shortly after, not even glancing toward the DJ booth, his heart sank. The final hour of his set felt like an eternity. Marcus tried to course-correct, gradually steering the music back toward more accessible territory, but the damage had been done. The momentum had been broken, the trust fractured. When he finally played his closing track, a soulful, emotional piece that normally would have been the perfect ending to a night of connection, it fell flat, echoing across a dance floor that was now more empty than full. As the house lights came up, revealing the debris of the night, empty cups, discarded flyers, the occasional lost accessory. Marcus felt a hollowness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. He'd failed, not just in impressing the scouts, but in fulfilling his primary responsibility, maintaining the energy and unity of the dance floor. As he packed up his equipment, a few regulars stopped by to thank him, their politeness more painful than criticism would have been. Vera approached as he was zipping his record bag closed. "Interesting choices tonight," she said, her tone careful, measured. "The first 2 hours were some of your best work. What happened after?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Marcus considered defensive responses, the pressure of the scouts, his desire to showcase range, technical issues with monitoring that had affected his perception of the room. But in the end, honesty felt like the only viable path. "I lost sight of what matters," he admitted. "I was thinking about impressing the right people instead of serving the room." "I'm sorry." Vera's expression softened slightly. "We all make that mistake at some point. The question is whether we learn from it." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "This community, they come here to feel safe, to experience joy and release. The music is a vehicle for that, not an end in itself. Sometimes I wonder if you fully understand that." Her words cut deeper than any direct criticism could have. They touched on the fundamental insecurity that had shadowed Marcus since his first day at Resonance. The fear that as a straight man, he would always be an outsider in this space, unable to fully comprehend its significance to the people who depended on it most. "I'm trying," he said finally. "I really am." Vera nodded. "I know. That's why you're still here." She glanced at her watch. "Get some rest. We'll talk more next week about your sets going forward." As Vera walked away, Marcus felt the weight of uncertainty settling over him. Was this a gentle warning or the beginning of the end of his residency? He finished packing in silence, the club now nearly empty as the cleaning crew began their work. The night felt like a failure, a step backward after months of building credibility and connection. Outside, the pre-dawn air was cool against his skin. A small group of clubgoers lingered near the entrance, smoking and chatting, their energy still high despite the late hour. Marcus nodded to them as he passed, not wanting to intrude on their post-club decompression. But one of them, a regular he recognized from many previous nights, called out to him. "Hey DJ, where are you headed now? Some of us are going to the after-hours spot on Westheimer." Marcus paused, surprised by the invitation. After the way the night had ended, he'd expected to slink home alone, replaying his mistakes until the sun came up. "After?" he asked, the question encompassing more than just his plans for the remaining hours of darkness. The group looked at him expectantly, their faces open and welcoming despite everything. In that moment, Marcus realized something important. His relationship with this community wasn't defined solely by his performance behind the decks. There was room for growth, for mistakes, for learning. Perhaps being an outsider wasn't a permanent state, but a starting point on a longer journey of understanding. "Yeah, come with us," another person added. "That last hour was rough, not gonna lie, but the beginning was fire. Besides, best way to learn is to get back out there, right?" There was no judgment in their voices, just the simple camaraderie of people united by their love of music and nightlife. Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "I'd like that," he said, and meant it. As they walked toward their next destination, conversation flowing easily among them, Marcus reflected on the complex interplay of identity, belonging, and purpose that had defined his journey as a DJ. He had entered this world as an outsider, drawn by the music but unsure of his place within the culture it supported. Tonight's failure had exposed the gaps in his understanding, but it had also revealed the generosity of a community willing to help him bridge those gaps if he approached with genuine humility and respect. The After Hours Club was smaller than Resonance, more intimate, with a sound system that favored warmth over power. As they entered, Marcus felt the familiar embrace of bass frequencies vibrating through his body. The DJ was playing exactly the kind of music he should have stuck with earlier, soulful, inclusive sounds that invited everyone into the experience regardless of background or identity. He watched how the crowd responded, noting the subtle communications between DJ and dancers that he had missed in his own performance. One of his companions nudged him. "See that? That's what we come for. Not just the drops and the technical stuff, but the feeling that someone up there gets us, you know?" Marcus nodded, understanding dawning with new clarity. I think I've been approaching it backward, he admitted. Trying to make people understand my music instead of using music to show that I understand them. His companion smiled. Now you're getting it. That's why we kept coming back to your sets, even before tonight. Sometimes you'd hit that perfect moment where it felt like you were speaking directly to us through the tracks. That's rare, man, even from DJs who come from within the community. The conversation continued as they found space on the dance floor, the music enveloping them in its rhythmic embrace. For the first time, Marcus was experiencing the club from the other side, not as the controller of the experience, but as a participant in it. He felt the vulnerability of surrendering to someone else's musical choices, the trust required to let another person guide your emotional journey. It was humbling and illuminating. As dawn approached and the after-hours session began to wind down, Marcus found himself in conversation with several other DJs who had come to decompress after their own gigs. They spoke candidly about their experiences, the pressures and responsibilities that came with their role in the community. One of them, a veteran who had been playing in queer spaces for over a decade, offered perspective that resonated deeply. Every DJ kills the vibe sometimes, she told him. What matters is how you recover, both in the moment and afterward. The best DJs I know are the ones who can admit when they've misread a room, who can course correct without ego getting in the way. And the very best are the ones who show up the next time having learned from it, who demonstrate through their music that they were listening to the feedback, spoken and unspoken. Marcus absorbed these words, recognizing their wisdom. So you think there is a next time? After tonight, I wasn't sure. She shrugged. That's up to Vera, and ultimately up to the community. But from what I've seen, you've built enough goodwill that one bad night won't define you, as long as you don't let it. As the after-hours session finally came to a close, and they spilled out into the morning light, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. The night had been a failure in some respects, but also an essential lesson. His identity as the straight DJ wasn't something to overcome or apologize for, but it did come with a responsibility to listen more deeply, to approach his role with greater awareness of the history and significance of these spaces. Walking home as the city began to wake around him, Marcus composed a message to Vera in his mind. Not excuses or defenses, but a genuine reflection on what had happened and how he intended to grow from it. Whether she gave him another chance or not, he owed her and the community that honesty. The sun was fully up by the time he reached his apartment, exhaustion finally catching up with him. But as he drifted toward sleep, his mind was already working on ideas for his next set, if he was fortunate enough to have one. It would be built not around showcasing his technical skills or impressing industry scouts, but around creating a genuine dialogue with the dancers, a musical conversation that acknowledged their trust as the precious gift it was. In the end, perhaps that was the answer to the question he'd asked at the club door. After wasn't just about where the night might lead, but about what comes after failure, after learning, after growth. For Marcus, the path forward was clearer now, not as the straight DJ trying to fit into spaces where he felt like an outsider, but as a DJ committed to serving the communities that had welcomed him, to honoring their histories through his musical choices, and to creating experiences that brought people together across all the boundaries that might otherwise divide them. As sleep finally claimed him, Marcus held on to this new understanding. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but he would face them with greater awareness and humility. The music, after all, had never been about him. It had always been about the connections it created, the safe spaces it maintained, and the joy it brought to people who needed it most. That was a responsibility worth getting right, worth learning from his mistakes for, worth showing up again and again until he truly understood what it meant to serve through sound. Total _char_count, 18,736.